Hello, everyone, and welcome to Livestrong's Icon EQ, Equity in Cancer Care. I'm Tam Hawkins, and I'll be your host for this event. There are so many reasons why we all should have vested interest in what's going on in cancer care today. The likelihood is that most of us have been affected by cancer either immediately or within our sphere of family and friend circle of influence. I'm here today because I believe in the mission of Livestrong. I had an experience with cancer personally, very closely with the death of my husband in 2014 uh, due to brain cancer. So, this topic is one that's near and dear to my heart personally in terms of equity and making certain that we can have different outcomes and that no one has to experience what me and my family have had to experience before. We've got some really important work to do today, and the cancer community is counting on us. As you know, we're going to be focused today on technology, specifically digital literacy and building trust through technology. Our first guest today is Michael Moskowitz from AeBeZe Labs. And he and his team are using technology to allow each of us to control how we feel by better understanding our digital content. Michael, welcome to Icon EQ.
Thank you. Sorry, I was on mute. I appreciate the intro. I also know that we're pressed for time, so I'm going to try and sprint through a subject that would likely require volumes in order to do it proper justice. But there was a very simple premise. For those of us that are on today's call that grew up in the States, in virtually every grade school classroom from K through 6, if not K through 12, there were at least 2 or 3 objects that you could predictably find every fall. There'd be a Mercator map, an American flag, and for the younger students, a copy of the alphabet. And by dint of exposure alone, this aside from reading and writing requirements that are taught K through 12, you'd absorb those reference points. And for most American students, you are required to twice learn the basics of sex ed, of sexual literacy in essence. You're taught the basics of the biology in the 5th grade, and as a second sort of follow-up primer or booster as a sophomore in high school, but the psychosocial dynamics of sex, you're twice taught about this deep and paramount biological urge. And yet in America today, we're never taught about the basics of digital hygiene, digital literacy, or digital nutrition. And most people today spend more time consuming digital assets, willfully or unwittingly, exposed to them obliquely or directly, than we spend eating, drinking, and sleeping combined. And so most people don't know what the contents are of their content. We expect routinely to find a nutritional label on food and beverages. We rely on that same label when it comes to making decisions about what medicine to buy. There's even a label on your mattress. And most of the materials that we listen to and watch have very little save for an age rating or some other abbreviations that Netflix has so generously provided. AC for adult content, V for violence, S for sex. Our view, and this was informed by a combination of a mountain of scientific literature that strongly correlates specific content types, movies, film, music, fill in the blank, with specific brain chemicals, neuromodulators, that govern mood. So GABA is the neuromodulator strongly correlated with sensations of calm tranquility. Dopamine, which I'm sure everybody has heard of, fault or courtesy of the time they spend on Facebook, controls pleasure, reward, and self-confidence. But we can do the same with acetylcholine for focus, testosterone for ease with aging, and several other neuromodulators as well. And so the ambition of our company was to take very seriously the one subject that clinicians and clergy can commonly agree to, which is that the fundamentals of human health and happiness and prosperity come down to diet, sleep, exercise, interpersonal relationships, and vocation. And those latter 2 are really difficult during COVID. But because of the way in which we spend our time and the people with whom we spend it and the percentage of our time gobbled up by tech, there's now a 6th critical pillar, and that's what we call digital nutrition. And that's understanding what digital assets can and will do to your mood and what the consequences can or might be longitudinally. And so we have a series of digital applications for the phone that are allowing you to self-administer doses of digital nutrition and to track it. We have a neuroanalytics tracker that you can apply to YouTube. So it's like X-ray vision for YouTube. Show me, tell me what's in this thing I'm watching. And maybe it can make it can help us make smarter decisions about what to show to our kids. Not all content is created equally. And those subtle distinctions are things that we need to each grow increasingly sensitive to, aware of, and able to discern in order to lead happier, healthier lives. So I know I'm probably pushing right up against time. If you'd like to learn more, there's a link. Try the app, see what you think. US Air Force seemed to like it. I should probably stop there.
Up next is a woman who works at the intersections of race, culture, and health. Born in Jamaica, raised in New York City, she draws from education, global health, entrepreneurship, and other disciplines in her work, with communities of color at the center. An alum of Boston College and the University of Michigan, Jodi-Ann Burey leads conversations with prominent community and business leaders with the goal to not just share ideas, but also leverage the power we already have to address inequities all around. In 2018, Burey's public health and social justice worlds collided with a spinal tumor diagnosis. Along that recovery journey, she built what was needed, a space to not feel alone. Jodi-Ann created Black Cancer, a narrative podcast about identity, trauma, and health inequities. She also serves as a founding co-chair of the Seattle Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Community of Practice. Jodi-Ann, the gallery is yours.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me today. I really, really appreciate sharing this space with you all, being invited to speak at Icon EQ, and to help set both the virtual and mental stage for the day. So as y'all have heard, I'm the creator and the host of the podcast Black Cancer, which explores the nuances of our lives as people of color told through our cancer journeys. The podcast is currently in its third season with 18 stories told in long form format. So there are over 36 hours of recorded conversations with people of color all across the country and one in Canada, sharing about how cancer has impacted their lives in some way. The guests on Black Cancer are currently battling cancer or are cancer survivors and thrivers. They are caregivers. They are cancer previvors. They are the loved ones to those the world has lost. They are the loved ones to those the world still has. Some of them are doctors and nurses, themselves holding the same, if not more, credentials than those taking care of them. All of them have a relationship with the healthcare system that has and will continue to change their lives forever. All across the country and one person in Canada, people raised their hands to tell their stories to me, a stranger, on a digital platform only for more strangers across the world, the whole world, to learn about the most intimate aspects of the most difficult parts of their lives. Perhaps even more nerve-wracking than sharing their stories with complete strangers, they risk aspects of their stories now being known by people who know them the absolute best, but still haven't heard the breadth and the depth of their cancer experiences. So the question I want to ask and hopefully answer for you all here today is why? Why does this happen? Why do people who do not know me raise their hands to tell their stories on the Black Cancer podcast? I will give you a second to come up with an answer in your head. All right, you ready? I will tell you why. Because every single one of the guests on the Black Cancer podcast is asking themselves the same exact question the folks at the Livestrong Foundation is asking themselves. What everyday cancer problem can we solve today? But perhaps unlike the folks at the Livestrong Foundation and everyone in this virtual room today, every single one of the guests on the Black Cancer podcast has the exact same answer, their own. Let me explain. The most critical part of the Black Cancer podcast is the hours of content you will never hear. Before each recorded episode, I bring with me a list of about 15 questions for an introductory meeting with a prospective guest. Some of those questions include, what surprised you most about your journey? What do you know now that you wish you knew before? What were some of the hardest parts of your journey? Who supported you during that time? Despite this level of preparedness, I find myself almost always asking only one question. Tell me how cancer has impacted your life. An hour later, most often times 2, sometimes 3. What unfolds feels like a New York City summer rain, a surprising yet expected downpour that calms you down and comforts you as much as it makes you want to run back home and take cover. Their stories flash flood. As abruptly as the story begins is as abruptly it ends. If you submit to it and let it wash over you, you can spend some time in it creating memories you'll never forget. There are aspects to my guest stories that never made it to the recorded conversation, and I will never forget them. At the end of each recorded episode, I always thank my guests profusely for coming on the podcast and sharing their story. What proceeds you almost never hear, since the episodes are already so long that something has to end up on the cutting room floor. But it's another 10 to 30 minutes of guests thanking me back. Then I thank them again, and then they thank me back until we basically start a whole new conversation about who is doing what for who. Sharing your cancer story on a digital platform like a podcast is a hugely generous gift that I do not take lightly. I want them to know how much their time and vulnerability are appreciated, not just for the project, but for me personally, to know that I'm not alone in the fear and anxieties about being hurt by your body, to know that your body or the body of your loved one can betray you or them at any point and create something that can shift the trajectory of your life. It feels like free therapy sometimes, and I want them to understand that their stories can change lives, if not save lives. Much less in the actions I took for my own health, and much more so in how I began to understand my own self-worth, how to cope with surviving, and what more I can offer myself and those around me. What I underestimated is how much so many of my guests needed to share their stories as much as, if not more than, I needed to hear them. The feeling of free therapy was reciprocated, often calling the process of our time together both healing and necessary. In some cases, transformative, to reconnecting with past pains and unlocking new perspectives on aspects of their experiences. So yes, the everyday cancer problems they are looking to solve by being on the Black Cancer podcast are their own. How do they resolve all the platitudes their loved ones share that didn't make them feel better, but more isolated and unheard? How do you continue to share the legacy of a sister lost to triple negative breast cancer after advocating for the mammogram she needed but was too young to get? How do you heal the hurt of past medical traumas as a child once diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer? Should I consider myself as someone who is dying because I have a stage 4 diagnosis? How do I make sense of the mistreatment from my doctors who simply handed me a pamphlet and a script immediately after dropping a leukemia diagnosis? Was I right to leave my doctor after I felt like I wasn't heard? I probably should have done it earlier, and maybe I want others to do the same. Is it okay that I'm mad at my father for disrespecting my same-sex relationship as he is fighting his battle with cancer? How do I understand my role as a daughter of immigrants and the legacy to uphold as critical moments in my business happen the same week she passes away from cancer? Can I have the space to process grief in the way I need to process it? Certainly, I cannot be the only one going through any of this, right? How can I get more people to learn more about or support the organization that I created because none existed like this when I needed it? What I really, really, really appreciate about the Live Strong's Foundation mission and call to action, what everyday cancer problems can we solve today, is captured so cleanly and succinctly in one simple word: every day. Our lives every day, our everyday lives, everyday experiences, everyday anxieties, fears, joys, laughter, the tiniest decisions we need to make, the biggest decisions that we need to make. What we decide matters. What we decide doesn't. Our families, our jobs, our friends, our goals, our dreams, both deferred and realized. The Black Cancer Podcast takes seriously the everydayness of our lives as we define it for ourselves. You see, racism does not define our lives as people of color. Does it shape our experiences, this historical devaluing of our humanity just because of the color of our skin? Absolutely. But does it define us? No. What I love about Black Cancer is that it allows us to tell our own stories based on what's important to us, how we see it, what matters to us on our own terms. When left with no boundaries, no expectations to answer the question, what is cancer like for people of color? As if there's some special way that we think about cancer. When we tell our own stories, it's not often that we put racism or whiteness at the center. We put ourselves there. As you think about your task today and delving into digital literacy and building trust through technology, do not lose sight of the everydayness of people's lives. Do not forget to consider whose life you're talking about. What I knew from my own story and what I have evidenced in each episode of the podcast is that our identity as people of color is a political designation. It's where we go when we need to fight, where we advocate for ourselves. It's where we go to create change. And too often, this collective political identity is used against us to flatten us, to erase the everydayness of the specific experiences of our lives that still make us human. You cannot solve everyday cancer problems, even with technology, especially not with technology, if you remove the human at the center of those experiences. Too often we look at big data and treat that information as paramount, to the point where it colors our lens and we can't see anything else. People's stories are data too. Everyday joys and challenges people experience, that's data too. It's a seductive thought to solve big, hairy goals through technology. But while technology can help make innovative solutions efficient and scalable, it can efficiently scale our mistakes, our misunderstandings, and racial bias. I have seen it happen firsthand and was part of the problem I was looking to solve. After completing my master's degree in public health from the University of Michigan, I worked in global health for nearly 5 years. One of my projects was we helped a partner organization launch a smartphone application to help community health workers assess and treat common health issues in remote communities, especially for young children and pregnant women. A noble goal, yes. But did we help? I'm not sure. Did we create more harm? Potentially. You see, we left community health workers in a rural community in Malawi with an unfamiliar cell phone device, with an unstable application that required way too many updates to be of any use. It was the rainy season. So traveling out to these remote spaces to the healthcare centers to support the community healthcare workers when they were having issues was one thing. Another thing was the lack of enough sun to keep their solar chargers up with enough juice to keep those cell phones consistently charged. We required too much reporting to help understand what was happening with the project that we lost sight of the very skilled community health workers who had very real patients who needed their help. Perhaps making time to adequately anticipate these very knowable challenges could have been costly, but so too was not getting this project right. When I was working in global health, I created a framework of 7 considerations to embed more diversity and inclusion principles in our photography of vulnerable people and situations that we shared in our work. I want to offer a twist on those recommendations to help support you in problem solving today. Think about motive. What is the purpose of the solution? What is this particular problem to solve important? Why is this particular problem to solve important? And why is it compelling to you? Think about substitution. If it was you or your loved one, would you want to be treated this way with this solution? Is this something that you would feel good about as support for you? Think about positionality. Does the framing of the solution disempower or marginalize the audience in any way? What's the context? What's the broader context to the problem that you're looking to solve? Think about power. Who are the doers of this work? Are there racial, cultural, gender imbalances or the like? And who are the receivers and the doers of the solution? What's the tone? Does the emotional tone or message of the solution elicit equitable emotions like empathy, compassion, understanding, or shared humanity? Or does it rely on top-down emotions such as pity, guilt, shame, or sympathy? And lastly, audience. Who is this solution for? What assumptions are you making about their lives? How would you verify the need or the expected impact? And is your audience part of developing the solution in any way? These are the elements that I brought to my work in global health. These are the elements that I bring to the podcast. And these are the elements that I hope inspires your thinking today. Every single day, people's lives across the country and across the world are forever changed by cancer diagnosis. A cancer cured, a cancer managed, a cancer defeated, a battle with cancer lost. Every single day, we make strides towards racial equity in healthcare, strides towards racial equity in cancer care. Every single day, we also make strides away from racial equity in healthcare, away from racial equity in cancer care. How many steps we take forward and how many steps we take backward depend on all of us truly to keep the everydayness of our lives at the center of it all, so that hopefully the balance between the steps forward and backward could keep us steadily moving forward to create real, sustaining, equitable social change. Thank you.
Thank you, Jodi-Ann, so much. And I can't wait to share your podcast, Black Cancer, to my network. It sounds exciting, and I know it will be helpful. And I wish my family had something like that when we were experiencing our cancer diagnosis. So everyone, when you registered, you were asked to pick one of 2 conversations we're having today. These women are experts in their field. And as such, I really wanted to make sure you got to meet each of them, no matter the room you chose to be in. Room 1 is focusing on digital literacy. Walisha Jenkins is our conversation guide for this room. She has a master's degree in biological medical sciences, currently serves in many roles at Fisk University, including bioinformatics, laboratory manager, and is a co-founder of STEM Queens. Welcome, Walisha.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited and honored to be here and to be a part of this conversation. As she said, coming from a health disparity background, this topic is near and dear to my heart, both professionally and personally. So I'm so excited to share and learn from you all and work on changing this dialogue or converting this dialogue that we'll have today into like decisive action and making a change in our individual and respective communities. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Walisha. Our trust and technology conversation will be led by Dr. Virginia Brown from Dell Medical School's Department of Population Health. She works to disrupt how the social and political structures contribute to the information and reformation of racial bias in healthcare and in health. Welcome, Dr. Brown.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here, both personally, more personally than professionally. Wow, I was going to say something and emotion just took me over. The one other than my mother, who's alive, my dearest friend, who I've known, I remember since I was 4, but I knew before then, died on June 2nd of this month from cancer. So I'm here to support that. I'm here as in my professional work. I do work at the intersection, of race, class, and gender, right? But I do it with a lens. I'm a clinical ethicist by practice. I'm a medical sociologist by training. So I'm very interested in community agency and the ethics, right? It's not a conversation that we have enough of. So I'm really looking forward to talking with you in my small group. We've got some brainstorming activities, to get this conversation going. So bring me your A game and let's see what we got, folks. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for all of your work and your vulnerability. We certainly appreciate that. So now it's time to find some answers. In a brief moment, Brittany is going to hit the magic button and we'll send us all to the breakout room we registered for. You won't need to do a thing. When you get there, just be sure to have your camera on, be ready to unmute, and most importantly, let your voice be heard. When you're done, you will be sent back here for a few final things. Okay, Brittany, we're ready. See you all soon.
All right, here we go.